based in Canada. Yomi is the country manager for Intake Education Canada, and Mathew is an immigration consultant. Please note that at Intake Education, we do not charge for any of our services. However, Mathew will charge for consultation or any other services that you need from him. So he will give you more information during the presentation. Yomi and Mathew, I hope you are fine, you are ready, and I thank you for making time to join us today. Okay, this is the plan. We have 1 hour, 30 minutes for the program. Short, I will say, but you learn a lot from it. So I will take just 5 minutes to introduce intake education. Then Yomi will follow with the message before Mathew comes with his presentation. So after that, we will now move to the last part of the session, that is the questions and answers. So please use the box, the chat box, to type in any question that you have, and we will address them all at the end of the presentation. Okay, as the experts are here, please, let's get started. A few things about intake education. Founded in 1993, we are a leading global educational service provider, and we can assist you when you want to study outside. We offer free services. It means that you don't pay for any of our services. Please, you should know we have over 30 local offices across Africa, Asia, and Europe. So, and we've helped more than 94,000 students to study outside since 1993. This is our territory. You can see in Africa, we are based in Ghana, where I'm speaking from, and we have office in Nigeria, in Kenya as well. At the same time, we have offices in other countries like UK, Canada, India, Thailand, and Taiwan, and so on. These are some of the services that we offer. So we represent schools. It's official. We are the official representative for schools in Ghana. We offer free documentation, free document consultation. So it means that you bring your document, we can review, make sure that it's something the schools are going to accept before we submit your admission application. Yeah, we can also assist you with the application, admission application. We can follow up until you get your admission, but we will not stop there. When you have the offer, there is much more to do. So we can assist you with your visa application. The goal of today's event is even to give you more information on how to apply for a study permit to study in Canada. We can also assist you with accommodation booking. You know, you need to have a place where you should go and stay to continue or further your education in the school. And when the visa is granted, we will brief you, we will give you up-to-date information before you leave your home country. We have schools in different countries, especially Canada. So we have schools in Ireland, in Australia, UK, US. At the same time, we have schools in other countries like China or New Zealand. In Ghana, we have offices in Accra, and then we have a branch in KUMASI too. So in Accra, we are based at Ako-Adjei Park. If you know the Methodist church, just behind the church, you see the building called the Orangery. You can screenshot this or Google Map, and then it will take you to our office in Ako-Adjei Park. So we also have an office at East Legon. If you know, if East Legon Melcom, we are not far from Melcom. The same building, the Orangery, you can Google Map and then it will take you to the office. In KUMASI, we are based at Ahodwo Roundabout, that white building where KFC is, or Access Bank, Asaase Radio. We are in the same building on the second floor. TAKORADI is a virtual office, so you need to call or send a WhatsApp message or an email to my colleague Abigail, and she will assist you. Myself, these are my contact details. Isifudori, you can send an email, you can call or send a WhatsApp message, then I will get in touch with you and take you through the process. You can connect with Intake via our social medias, so Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all those things. So if you like, you can just screenshot this and then follow us on social medias for daily information. As I said earlier on, we have Yomi, who is the Intake Education Country Manager based in Canada, and we also have Mathew here, a Canadian immigration consultant. So they are ready to give you the information that you need. Please, again, use the chat to drop in any question that you have. We will address them all at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Yomi to come with the message. Thank you so much.
Hello, Yomi. Thank you so much. So maybe you can stop sharing so I can just share my slide. Thank you.
All right, I'm doing that now.
Okay. So can you confirm that you can see my slide?
Yes, please confirm.
Okay, thank you. So good morning, everyone in Ghana. It's also morning here, very early here in Canada, Ontario, Canada. I'm speaking from. My name is Yomi, just like as the school has introduced me, and I work for Intake Education, Country Manager Canada. So one thing I must mention that the CIFU perhaps didn't mention is that Intake Education is also now IDP Education, idp.com, because we just been recently acquired by IDP, and I needed to let people know that before the year runs out, all our offices will also transition to IDP. So you can see that I'm wearing something that indicates IDP. So all intake offices will become IDP, but we are aligned. The same vision is just going to be a bigger scope of operation. So I just wanted to put that out there. But all our operation as usual will continue to the end of the year, so we transition properly to IDP. So with me this morning is Mathew Mcdonald, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. He will be coming on after my short presentation to also brief us more on the Canadian study visa procedures, aspects, and all other things that are related to that. So I will be speaking more generally about Canada, the attraction and the opportunity it presents. Yeah, these are some of the things that my colleague Yosefu has already gone through with you, so I will not need to repeat that. Some of our services, which Yosefu has already mentioned to you as well. So moving on to quick facts about Canada. In Canada, it's actually common knowledge that we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. There's a stable parliamentary democracy in Canada, like we all know, and it's officially bilingual. English and French is being spoken in Canada. In fact, you find a lot of people that speak both English and French around in Canada. However, for people that are coming from the Anglophone side of Africa, they are typically welcome because most provinces still find relatively high number of people speaking English. Canada is a developed country and it's ranked among the G7 for overall living conditions. I think it's one of the top 10 most desirable countries to live as of this year from the index that came out recently. So it's still leading the pack among developed countries. Boast of world-leading institutions with 96 public universities and over 15,000 programs. Some notable research that we might be familiar with include the iMac screen, the BlackBerry, the flat screen technology, all were developed from Canada, and so many others that, innovations that came in from Canada, which will be too numerous to mention in this forum. So why study in Canada? I mean, that's one of the reasons why people would be gravitating towards this presentation to know, okay, I mean, I'm sure that we all have a lot of other things in our mind. Okay, why would I study in Canada? Why would I not go to the UK? Why would I not go elsewhere, basically? But however, let me just, brief us on some of the, top tier reasons why you should consider studying in Canada. The number one thing is academic excellence. It's always very important to know that quality assurance is key anywhere you want to go and study. And Canada's education is quality assurance. It's global and it's world leading. The quality of life in Canada is very high. So it's actually rated very high by all the indexes you find around that quantifies the quality of life in different countries, basically. So what that means, that the propensity to live longer is higher, when you are in Canada, because that actually has to do with the quality of life, and not necessarily does that have to do with maybe probably you being rich or not being rich, but the atmosphere is clean, it's conducive, is safe. I mean, there's no country that's 100% safe, but the index is relatively high in terms of safety. Cultural diversity is one of the things that what you want to consider when it comes to Canada. You want to meet with people that are coming from different parts of the world, mingle with different people from all over the world. So their cultures, it's a rich form of culture when you meet with people that are not from your background. It gives you a different perspective to the way you see life and the way you see issues, and it kind of helps to enlarge our horizon. It's safe and peaceful. I've mentioned you can earn while you learn. There's so many opportunities for job. We know international students can work while they are studying in Canada. That is official, basically. However, it's limited to a particular number of hours. Immigration opportunities. Of course, there's opportunity for you to transition after your studies. Like I mentioned, it's a multicultural society. While you're studying, you get to meet with different people from different backgrounds, and that is a very good opportunity to connect and network with people from all over the world. Multiculturality, you find different kinds of people from different kind of background, living in Canada, basically, and that's actually a very rich experience, basically. You learn a lot by interacting with others. The career prospects for coming to study in Canada is very high. We all know that the whole world is now turning to a skill-based, career progression pathway for most professionals in different industries, basically. So the coming to study in Canada actually equip you with the skills that are needed for you to progress in your careers. And there are diverse careers that you can actually, pursue in Canada, depending on your background and depending on your interests. When you have studied, I know most of us that are not maybe probably have the entrepreneurial mindset might want to, work for great companies, and there's no shortage of those great companies in Canada. You can see some of these top companies that are also in Canada. These are just a short snippet of the kind of companies that, you can work for in Canada when you have, when you have finished your studies, basically. There are many more, and others that you can work for, that are global companies that are based here in Canada, that gives opportunity to international students. Like I've mentioned, you can work while you're studying, and after you fully finish your studies, you can transition completely, taking advantage of the postgraduate work permit. And then after the postgraduate work permit, basically, you probably will be eligible. Terms and conditions apply. You have to apply as well. Ensure that you fulfill all your academic and work programs, and then your way to permanent residency. And it's easy to transition to permanent residency when you study in Canada and also do your postgraduate work in Canada. These are the emblems of the 10 provinces and the 3 territories we have in Canada, which I've spoken to earlier. Just touched on some specific places in Canada that might be of interest. The beautiful picture you're looking at is that of Vancouver, located in British Columbia. It's one of the highly sought after places in Canada. I must warn though, it's actually a bit expensive to live in Vancouver, but it's a very beautiful place. The weather is mild compared to, most other parts, but it rains a lot as well. Another very beautiful city is Calgary, located in the province of Alberta. It has an energy background. It used to be one of the more like the oil capital of Canada. Actually a cosmopolitan city. It's actually highly ranked for its beauty, scenery as well. The weather compared to Vancouver can actually be colder, basically. But it's also one of the places that people sought after to live in Canada with job opportunities, basically. And of course, there are quite a number of international schools in Calgary. We have 7 universities and 7 community colleges as well. Toronto is a very popular, city in Ontario. And it's actually, like the business hub of Canada, and I think it's one of the most popular, basically. Everybody wants to come to Toronto, and it's actually located in the province of Ontario because of the opportunities that it presents in terms of job prospects. It's also very expensive. It's almost at par with Vancouver in terms of living expenses. But I think in terms of housing costs, Vancouver probably might, probably take the lead there. Niagara Falls is one of the iconic tourist destinations in Canada, especially located in the city in the province of Ontario. It's one of the places that you find a lot of tourists come around to. And if you find yourself in Canada as an international student, regardless of the province where you're studying, it's one of the places that you might want to visit, before you complete your studies or even afterwards, basically. Just to touch a bit more about the education system in Canada. Each province is responsible for education at all levels within it, including universities. The year is usually split into 3 semesters. For the fall, we have the August, ending stroke early September starts, to December or January, depending on the institution. For winter, it's usually from January to April, but usually, that is for maybe probably a minimal number of courses because not all schools, start January, but every school will start in the fall. For summer, between April stroke May to July. So that this depends on the institution generally, but these are actually the trends in general that, or the pattern that the institutions in Canada follow. We work with quite a number of institutions, and notable among them is the University of Alberta, University of Ottawa. We have quite a number of them. I did mention that, we've been acquired by IDP. So, together, in terms of consolidation of partnership, we'll probably be having, an extensive reach to over 100 partners in Canada. So that depends on the institution and the course you want. And when you meet with our, counselors, they will be able to advise you appropriately on the institution that is best suited for your course based on your budget and, of course, the entry requirements. Thank you so much. I will stop sharing there so I can allow Mathew to take over. Okay, Mathew, you can go ahead and share your slide.
Hello, Mathew. I think you are muted.
Okay, maybe he doesn't know.
There we go. You can hear me now?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mathew.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes. Yes, we can
Mathew,
see
we
slide.
can see that.
Good morning, everyone in Ghana. It's wonderful to be here. I am actually in Montreal today, so I'm going to tell you a bit about Canada and places in Canada, but my home is in Toronto right now. So I'm going to tell you some stories about studying in Canada. I think it's really helpful for you to understand this country on the other side of the world a bit better through someone who lives there. So I'm going to tell you some stories about living there, including my Canadian study story. I want to tell you about how the choices I made to study in Canada impacted my life. And I'm going to tell you about what the options are for studying in Canada, so that you can start to think about how you might want to make decisions about where you would study in Canada. Because it's a big country and there's a lot of great choices. And so I'm hoping that some of what I share today will inspire you in some of your decision making. So after I tell you my Canadian study story, I'm then going to offer some study permit advice, because as Yomi mentioned, I am a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. So I've been doing that since about 2016. And then I'm going to follow, we're going to have a question and answer period. So, hi, this is me. This is me in my suit, looking fancy at my job where I work Monday to Friday. I currently work at the University of Toronto, which is a very, well, probably one of the best known universities in Canada. It's one of the largest. It's a research institution. It's known as one of the best universities in the world. And I work at the business school there. So that's why I wear that suit. I wear the blue suit because I work with people for a Master of Finance program. I do recruitment and admissions for a Master of Finance program there. But I'm not from Toronto. I'm actually from a place called Manitoba, which is very different from Toronto. And I want to tell you my story today that begins in Manitoba so that you can start to understand how study can change your life in Canada. Because the choices you make to study and where you study in Canada will influence your life for years to come. So I'm going to help you understand that by explaining my background. But I also want to give you a few notes about me right now, including my favorite places in Canada. My favorite Canadian cities are actually Montreal and Vancouver. So I live in Toronto, and Toronto is a great city for building a career. It's an expensive city, like Yomi mentioned. It's a place where you have to work very hard in order to live, but there is a very high quality of life. It's a beautiful city with a lot of opportunity. But my favorite cities are actually Montreal and Vancouver. I'm in Montreal right now visiting friends. Montreal is a city that loves the arts. It's a very fun city. It's a great city for being a student in many ways. Although the immigration opportunities after studying in Montreal are not as good as the rest of Canada. And I'm going to tell you a bit more about that later. My other favorite city is Vancouver. That's a beautiful one that Yomi showed in a photo. It's a smaller city. It's by the mountains and the ocean. So you can enjoy the outdoors. You can enjoy the fresh air of the sea. And it has a West Coast energy, which in North America means it has a bit more relaxed of a vibe compared to Toronto, which is very fast paced, which is very career driven. Vancouver and Montreal are a bit more relaxed. So you can see from this list here, I've actually studied at I've worked or studied at 5 different schools in Canada. And they're listed there, I won't read them all. And I've also spent 4 years living outside of Canada. So I think part of what helps me understand the way Canadian education works is because I've worked in education systems in 2 other countries. And I've also worked with international students for over 10 years. And so I have a better understanding of different education systems from around the world and how those are similar or different from Canada. So I'm hoping that through the stories that I tell today, that I will help you understand exactly what the opportunities are that you can pursue. So before I begin, could I just get a confirmation, Yomi, that you can see me on camera? I don't see myself, so I just want to verify.
Yes, I can see you.
We can see you.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So let me begin by telling you where my story begins. My story begins in Manitoba. 38 years ago, I was born in this province known as part of the Canadian Prairies. You can see it on the map here, right in the middle of the country. It's the Purple Province there. It's a really big place. For context, the Manitoba is about the size of France, which is another place that I lived. So I grew up there on a pig farm, and I think it's really good context to know that I'm not from a city, even though that's where I've chosen to live my life now, because through education, I've actually been able to find opportunities in Canada. And I think that's one of the reasons I love working in education, because I really believe in Canada that education can change your life and that it can help you become a different person and build a different career. That it really is a wonderful place in many ways, because we have a publicly funded system that Canadians are very proud of, and there's a belief that through education you can change your life. And I have been very fortunate that I have been able to do that through my own education, which began in Manitoba. So imagine me on a pig farm, living out here far from people. My nearest neighbor was about 1 mile away. So I had my parents, my two brothers, and lots of big sky and fields. And you can see here what it looks like after harvest. But in the summer, it's truly outstanding. There's fields of yellow and purple and green against big blue skies, and it was a wonderful place to be a child. But farming wasn't for me. My brothers love farming. They're still there. All of my family lives there, but I just did not want to be a pig farmer. It was not a passion of mine like it is for the rest of my family. So I was there just for my schooling. I was there from kindergarten to grade 12. And so I know that we're here to talk about colleges and universities, but I want to explain briefly about the system that goes before that, and some of the terminology we use. Especially starting with kindergarten or pre-kindergarten. It's important to know that in Canada, if you bring children with you to study, that they will be able to study in the Canadian school system for free most of the time. Even as an international student, in most places, your children will go to school for free. Even though you will pay, that helps offset the cost and gives them access to opportunity as well if you have children. And the education system begins in grade 1. We call elementary school grades 1 to 5, middle years grades 6 to 8, and high school from grades 9 to 12. High school is sometimes called secondary school, and you'll see that because we use the term post-secondary education in Canada. So I did my education up to grade 12 in Manitoba. And so this is a photo of Manitoba in the winter. So I told you Manitoba is a beautiful place in the summer. It's an agricultural region. It's also a very cold region. The people who live there actually learn to accept winter and actually love the winter in many ways. There's all kinds of winter activities like hockey, which I'm sure you've heard of. But it is very cold. It's important to understand that if you move there, that you will have to deal with cold. But the people who have moved there before have all learned how to accept it, and they have all learned, and they've learned to love it in many ways. It's certainly challenging, but it's also in some ways a source of pride for people who live in really cold places. So I decided that I wanted to go to one of the warmer places in Canada, though Toronto is one of the warmer places, just like Vancouver. Those are the two warmer places in Canada. And one of the ways in which I made some decisions about where I wanted to move was when I went to university after high school. And I want to emphasize the opportunity that I had through education, because my parents didn't have any money for me to go to school. I think it's very important context to know that in Canada, the son of a pig farmer can go to university and use education to change his life. That you don't have to stay in the life that you're born into. And that comes in many ways through things like government loans. These are only accessible to permanent residents and citizens, but again, even if you as an international student can't access them, it's important to plan ahead. It's good to know that if you have children and you all become permanent residents or citizens, that they would have access to these government student loans. So I was able to take out loans through the government so that I could go to university. And that really allowed me the opportunity to explore what I wanted to do with my career. It allowed me to learn more about the world. It allowed me to really understand different things like literature and communications and history and what different career paths existed. University, in many ways, is a time of exploration. It's a time when people become independent in Canada. It's a time when people grow up. Many people in Canada go to school close to where they grew up. It's different from the United States, where many people travel to go to university in a different part of the country. But Canadians are known for staying really close to where they grew up. So I moved 100 kilometers from my family's farm, and I went to a small university called Brandon University. It was a university with 3,000 students in a city of 50,000 people. So it was a good transition for me to move from a farm to a slightly more urban area. It was a good opportunity for me to become independent, living only 100 kilometers away from where I grew up. And it was an opportunity for me to think about what I wanted to do with my life. At first, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And so a lot of my early career was focused on teaching before I ended up working in the university sector and in education. So now if you go to college or university, it's even more career focused now. There's work experiences built into programs like co-ops, internships, and practicums. There's been a big shift in Canadian education since I was a student to really help people get work experience so that after they graduate, they get good jobs quickly. There's still an appreciation for deep learning and research that comes with university, but there's also a shift towards career-focused programming. And I want to use that career focus to help you understand some of the educational options at the post-secondary level in Canada. Again, I use the phrase post-secondary. This means after high school. So this is a term that is used in Canada a lot for college and university. So colleges have programs between 1 and 4 years. The idea of a college is that it's going to be really career focused. It's about getting you into a specific job quickly. It's considered hands-on, practical learning. So for example, a college can be a place where you do a program specifically in something like marketing or plumbing or film, like directing, producing, editing film. It can be a place where you study engineering as well, and it can be a place where you study business. But the idea with all of these programs is that they are really focused on a specific job that you're going to get after. At the opposite of that is the university, where the idea is deeper learning, it's more theoretical, and there's a lot of research focused. And this is where you'll get different subject areas like literature or biology or mathematics that don't have an obvious career that you would take afterwards. They don't have a job title in the program that you would take, whereas college programs, you can often tell the type of job you will do afterwards based on the title of the program, whereas university can allow you to take that education in different ways. Again, I studied literature, so I learned things like communication skills, presentation skills. I also studied theater, which again helped with my presentation skills now. I also had the opportunity to learn French and history. Again, my goal at the beginning was to become a teacher, so I learned subject areas that I would be able to use when I was teaching later on. And there's a third term that I want you to be familiar called polytechnic, which you might see sometimes. In other countries, a polytechnic might be called an Institute of Technology or a University of Applied Sciences. The idea of a polytechnic is that it's going to be a mixture of the university and college experience. It's going to be, still focused on deep learning, but it's going to be more practical than a university would. And sometimes we'll see colleges that are also called polytechnics, like Humber College in Toronto, where I worked, or Ryerson University, which is now called Toronto Metropolitan University, is known as a polytechnic, and it used to be a college, but now it's a university. So sometimes the lines will blur, and it's not always obvious what what the different, or what, it's not always obvious if it's more practical or more theoretical. And that's why it's useful to speak to organizations like Intake and get advice on choosing, on understanding what the learning experience will be like at the place that you want to study. So going back to me and my story, I did a 4-year degree at university. At that time, I didn't understand a lot about what colleges were. I was guided towards university by someone in my high school who helped me think about how to become a teacher. So that's why I went to university without getting a lot of good advice myself. The best advice was that I could get government loans so that I could go and study university and spend 4 years becoming independent, building a good foundation in skills like communications, group work, thinking, that I could then apply more abstractly, more broadly to the career I took. One of the other wonderful things about my education in university is that I got exposed to French. And through my studies in French, I actually was able to spend 2 summers in Quebec. One of the wonderful things about Canada being a bilingual country is that there are programs that encourage people to learn about different parts of the country, and for people like me who grew up speaking English to learn French. So I actually was able to learn a lot about the province of Quebec by spending 2 summers in Quebec during my undergraduate years, or my bachelor's degree. This is a photo of Montreal here at night. This is my personal photo that I took last summer after a music festival in Montreal, because Montreal is a city that loves summer festivals and loves the arts. And so I mentioned Quebec because it's an important part to understand in Canada. It is predominantly French, and it's a place that is trying very actively to protect its French language and culture. So the immigration programs in Quebec are actually different from the rest of Canada. So if you choose to study in Montreal, it's really important that you study French if you want to stay in Quebec right now. The way that the immigration programs are designed that they really want to prioritize French speakers. So it's important for you to understand, or that you know if you go to Quebec that you study French. But if you want to stay in Canada, I would encourage you also to look outside of Quebec, because it's harder to stay in Canada through Quebec if you don't speak French. So let's take you to chapter 4. My story, I told you when I last left, we were in Manitoba. We were in the Canadian prairies, which are beautiful in summer and very cold in the winter, which are known for hockey and ice skating. And after my 4th year of university, I decided to pursue postgraduate education. So this is another level of opportunity in Canada where you can choose after a university degree to go and study some more. I wanted to study a master's degree because I loved the study of English literature and I was doing well at it, and I got some scholarships to help cover my costs of doing that. But you don't have to do a master's degree if you want to continue your studies. And I think these options are really important for anyone on the call who's already done their university studies in Ghana. It's possible to come to Canada for your postgraduate studies in different ways. And there's options again at the postgraduate level. It's not just about masters. I think it's really good to know about how strong our college system is in offering postgraduate certificates. These postgraduate certificates are a fairly new invention in Canada. They're probably under 20 years old, actually. And these are really career-focused learning opportunities that last between 8 months and 2 years in most cases. And these will be very career-focused, and they're designed for people to study after they complete their bachelor's degree. So someone like me who studied in English literature could, for example, go and study at the college level in something like public relations or copywriting or film writing or business communications. I could use my background at the university level and then find something that is career focused from what I liked, and then focus narrowly on that at the college level to help me get a job after graduation. Because one of the common understandings of university education is that it doesn't direct you to an obvious job afterwards. And that's where a postgraduate certificate is a really helpful thing for someone who has a university degree to channel themselves into a specific job in Canada. It's also very useful if you're coming from abroad. If you're coming from Ghana with a bachelor's degree already, postgraduate certificates are less expensive than university, and they will help set you up for a specific career in a new country where you don't know as many people and where you don't know what the labor market and what the career opportunities are like. The college programs will help guide you there through the professors and through staff who advise on program choices. But if you really want to study at the university level, if you like research like me, if you liked just exploring a specific subject area in depth, like I did my master's degree focusing on literature even more, then there are 3 different types of master's degrees that you can study in Canada. The first is the traditional one, which is focused on doing research, and that often involves a thesis. So for example, in my case, I wrote a 100-page research-based thesis at the end of my master's degree to show that I had the skills that I needed to continue to work in an academic environment. And this is the path you would choose if you want to become a university professor, and then you would ultimately go and do a doctorate or a PhD. But those are not the only types of masters that are available. Now in Canada, there's actually a lot of course-based and professional masters. And those master's degrees are actually increasingly career-focused, especially with professional masters. Those are typically in business and engineering. Examples of professional master's degrees are an MBA. That's probably the most famous type of professional master's degree. At the school where I work, at the business school at the University of Toronto, there are, I do recruitment and admissions for a Master of Finance degree. We have also a course-based professional master in financial risk management for people who want to go into a very specific area of finance and get jobs there. There are lots of master's degrees across the country at different universities that can be actually more career focused than even 20 years ago when I was a student. And you don't have to do a thesis in many of them. You can just take courses and graduate. There's options like this in education, for example. If you want to become a teacher, you can go through a university master's program. So when you do your research about where you want to study, in addition to thinking about the types of subjects you want to study and the type of career you want to have, it's useful to understand the difference between colleges and universities, because colleges will be less expensive and more career focused, and universities will often have higher admissions requirements, and they won't guide you as directly into a job afterwards. So if your goal is to transition to permanent residence in Canada, a college can actually be a more fast track solution than a university can. Of course, depending on the university and the program you get, your salary might be higher when you graduate from a university program, because the master's programs in some universities really direct you to the types of jobs that are higher paying in the Canadian labor market. So when I chose a master's, part of where I made my decision was about place. And so chapter 5 of my Canadian story is about moving from Manitoba. I told you earlier on about how I've lived in many different places. It was actually moving from my undergraduate degree to my master's that helped me move across the country. And so I thought long and hard about where I wanted to live. I applied to a university in Victoria, which is on the left side of the map here, on the west coast of Canada, in British Columbia. That's a city very near Vancouver. That was one of the options for me to study. I also was accepted into a school here in Montreal, which is known as McGill University, but I decided to go to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada. And it is also a city where there's a lot of French and English, and it's a city of about 1 million people. I thought for me, it was a good size of city. I didn't want to go to a big city like Toronto, and I was a bit intimidated by Montreal as well, that were a bit bigger, because again, remember, I grew up on a small pig farm. in a village of 400 people, and then the next city I lived in was 50,000 people. So for me, I was a bit intimidated by big cities, and so going to a city like Ottawa, which is a city of 1 million, was a good next step for me. And I think as you consider studying in Canada, it's really important to think about the place you go, because even though Canada does in many ways share a similar culture, a similar way of thinking, an openness to the world, values of tolerance, values of respecting human rights. There are differences in the regions in what you can expect about the life you would have. On the west coast, British Columbia, you can see that's where Vancouver is. There's a lot of mountains, and it's on the Pacific Ocean. The temperature is milder, so the people love the outdoors a lot. It's a place where people really value their health. It's a place where there's a bit of a slower pace of living, and it's a really nice, laid back, relaxed energy. Whereas in Alberta, on the other side there's a big mountain range that divides British Columbia and Alberta. In Alberta, so you can see beautiful mountains and people enjoy the outdoors as well. But it's a place where there's a lot of oil and gas. And so the oil and gas industry has shaped the province, as has its history of cowboys and horses and ranchers. And so Alberta is a place where independence is valued, individuality, and it tends to be what we call a bit more conservative in Canadian politics and values. Next are Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Those are the places that are very similar. Those places are flat in terms of geography. There are no mountains there. It is flat. It is agricultural, and they have lower populations and colder temperatures. So the nature there can actually be quite challenging to live with, especially in the winter. At the same time, these are places that are very hospitable and very welcoming to people, because anyone who lives there knows that you actually could die in winter if you stay outside. So people help each other a lot. Even in small towns, there can be when new families come, especially from other countries, I know that people get together to try to help in really kind ways. And Manitoba and Saskatchewan really want people to move there and to immigrate there, because they don't have a lot of people. So if your goal is to immigrate to Canada, going to Manitoba or Saskatchewan can sometimes be an easier pathway than going to other places like Ontario and British Columbia. Ontario, which is where I am now, has the most people in Canada. So Toronto is the big city that everybody knows, and Toronto in many ways gets most people because people know I've heard of it, or people know other people who live there. Toronto is the most diverse city in Canada, probably the most diverse in the world. Over half of the people who live in Toronto were not born in Canada. It might be hard to imagine what that looks like, where the idea of being Canadian really is constantly shifting by the people who arrive. There certainly is, a history, a tradition. There are many people who have lived for hundreds of years in Toronto since the British Empire set up shop there. But right now, it's a very diverse place, and a lot of people are attracted to it because if you come from Ghana, then you can find other people from Ghana very easily. And so you can quickly build a sense of community in a place that is new. And you can find a lot of the foods and products from home because there is a sizable population from almost all regions of the world. At the same time, it's very expensive as a result because most people are trying to move to Ontario. So although there's great benefits of Ontario because of the familiarity of home, it also costs more, and it's harder to immigrate to Ontario than it is to other places in Canada. Next on the map, you see Quebec, which I'm going to skip because I talked about it earlier. And then finally, I want to talk about the other small provinces on the right by the Atlantic Ocean. These are the Atlantic provinces, and they actually share some immigration programs together. And it's actually easier to immigrate there as well because they're experiencing population loss. A lot of young people left the region in the past 20 years, and they're just starting to revitalize and come back. And part of how they're trying to revitalize is to attract talented people from around the world to move there. And it's started to happen, and it's changing quickly. There's wonderful places to study in the Atlantic region that are lower cost, and there's ways to stay and immigrate if you're happy there. And again, this is a very welcoming region. I think there are smaller cities, the cost of living is lower, and I think integrating into a new community and a new culture can be a friendlier process than in some of the big cities where you don't know anybody. So I think it's really important to think about when you want to be in a big city. Do you want to go in a smaller city? And there's some cost of living factors as well. You know, the most expensive places are Toronto and Vancouver. I really think you should consider carefully before going to Toronto or Vancouver. They are very expensive places, even for people who are working. I find it would be very hard. It's very hard to be a student in those expensive places, which is why places like New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, which are lower cost, are great for being a student when you aren't earning as much money. Or cities that are less expensive include Montreal, Winnipeg, and Regina. But I also want you to explore smaller cities and towns. Like I've given a list of a few here. I encourage you to be open to places that you've never heard of and to take the time to learn more about them, because there's a lot of wonderful mid-sized cities in Canada that have great education programs and which can be quite welcoming and can really change your life. You don't have to go to big cities. Just because you haven't heard of the name doesn't mean that it is not good quality, because Canada has really good quality education across the country. Canada has built a strong publicly funded education system that even if you are going to a university that you've never heard of, as long as it's a publicly funded college or university, you can count on it being very good quality. And so I want to give a piece of advice to you if you're thinking about coming to Canada. I want you to take time to think about your decision. I want you to talk with advisors from Intake, use their expertise, and choose a program of study with care. It's important that you pick something that you can build on from your background and that will take you towards your future goals. It's important for applying for a study permit. Eventually, that you're able to explain how the program you study fits with your background and how you developed this interest in the program that you are planning to study. If you choose a program of study with care, if you choose a place that you think you'll be happy in and a program that excites you, that's going to increase your satisfaction while studying in Canada. And that's also going to improve your career opportunities. So I really encourage you to take time. You're looking at changing your life if you move to a new country and you want to study something new. So make sure that you're changing your life into the one you want, not just the first available life that you can identify. The place you choose, the program you choose, is going to take you into a new community of people. It's going to shape your career for years to come. And the people you meet are going to be part of your network for your life. So work with IDP to explore the many study opportunities that Canada has. It's a country where you can dream about new opportunities, and there's a lot of different choices. So take the time to choose carefully. And now I'm going to close out the story of myself in Toronto with a photo here. This was taken from where I used to live. This is my previous apartment before I moved about 1.5 years ago. So this is the Toronto city skyline. You can see it's a very dense city with a lot of high rises. Toronto actually has the most cranes in the sky of all cities in North America. That's because of the number of apartment towers that are being built. These Toronto gets about 100,000 new people per year. It's a city that is growing quickly. It's a city full of opportunity, and it's a city where you might want to work after your studies. I mean, you're welcome to study there too, but you need to have a much higher budget if you want to study in Toronto compared to elsewhere. But it is an exciting city. As I said, there's people from around the world. There's all kinds of job opportunities, and it's a place where you can reinvent yourself and have a new life, and that's what many people do when they move to this new city. I've been in Toronto for 10 years now, and it has allowed me the opportunity from when I moved to the city, and I only knew 3 people in 2013 when I first moved to Toronto. I know many more now, and I've grown in my career and to build a life that I'm comfortable with and that I'm very proud of. And so it is a city where people focus on their careers, and it can be a challenging city in many ways too, because you have to work very hard to keep up with the cost of living in Toronto. But the benefits are many. So I'm just going to summarize again, taking you back to the original slide. I've started today with my home province of Manitoba, told you that I live in Ontario now. Use that map to help you understand the vastly different places in Canada and even the distances. So right now, the distance between where I live and where I grew up is 2,500 kilometers. Canada is a massive country, and so you won't be moving between regions very often, or if you do, it can be costly to move between regions. So you need to choose a region, a province, a city, where you are going to be comfortable spending a lot of your time and building your new home. And so I'm going to next move into talking about immigration questions and study permits, because I, having grown up in Canada, did not need any special immigration documents to study, but any of you would if you come to Canada to study from Ghana. So I actually was an international student advisor for a number of years at Humber College in Toronto, and I worked specifically with international students, helping with study permit and immigration questions. So in order to do that, I got my license as I'm called a regulated Canadian immigration consultant. That's a license in Canada, one of the licenses you need to do immigration advising in Canada. So that's why I'm here today, and that's why I have this expertise in immigration. It's because of international students specifically. So now I'm going to speak about study permits, this document that you would need to come to Canada. Because it's important to understand that even after the first step is to apply to a college or university, find a program of study, and choose a place to live. And once you have that letter of acceptance, then you need to apply for another document called a study permit, or a study visa, as it's often known. So you need a visa to get into Canada. So this image here, this beautiful image, is taken from Calgary. It is the Calgary Public Library. I use these images in my slides. The first one is a public library in Halifax, which is a city on the east coast of Canada. This one is near the mountains in Calgary. It's a beautiful public library. Again, I use these images of public spaces in Canada, of learning. You can see behind me, my backdrop is a library as well, because I really believe that one of the advantages of Canada is that we have public education and public learning, so that anybody can change their life through learning, and they can increase the opportunities for themselves through education. So let me now tell you about the study permit process. I have 5 questions that I'm going to use to open our conversation today about studying and about applying for a study permit, because unfortunately, after choosing your program of study and after choosing where you want to live, getting a study visa or a study permit is actually much harder and can actually be a really disappointing experience, because people are not always successful in getting the visa, which is why Intake has asked me to join today to help you understand some things you can do to help prepare to be successful in getting that study visa. So it's important to apply as soon as possible once you have your letter of acceptance. Once you have your letter of acceptance, it can take many months to get the study permit. So whether you are applying to start a program this coming September, or maybe January next year, or the year after, as soon as you have your letter of acceptance or offer of admission, it's called, it's important for you to apply as soon as possible. Because it usually takes about a month to get your study permit application ready. And then from that point, usually you have to wait another 3 or 4 months. Unfortunately, sometimes it can take even longer, as we are expecting now, because the Canadian government workers who work in immigration are part of a strike right now. So we're not sure how long this will last, but it will slow down the timeline for processing study permits this summer. The good news is you can still prepare and submit an application, which is what I encourage people to do. I think in the next few weeks, we'll know more what the strike is going to look like. It started just 2 days ago. And I have some friends who work for the Canadian government. They're expecting that it should only be a couple of weeks, not much longer, but again, nobody knows for sure. So the important advice here is start working on a study permit application as soon as possible once you have a letter of acceptance. And when you are working on that application, there's a number of things that you need to think about to improve your chances of success, because the visa officer who reviews your application is looking to determine if you're a genuine student or not. Because sometimes we talked about how you can use study as a pathway to immigrate to Canada, but the visa officer's job is to find out or to figure out people who don't really want to study in Canada, who are just using the study visa to come to Canada and then not actually go to school. So you need to show them that you need to try to convince them that you truly do want to go to school. So that's why you're going to explain how you chose a program of study that makes sense for you based on your age, your academic background, or your employment history. So even though it's possible to change your life, you need to be able to explain how your future goal is connected with your past, so that the visa officer understands your thought process of how you got from what you're doing now to what you want to study in the future. And you're also going to have to explain how you can use your Canadian education to help your career in Ghana, because even though there are immigration options in Canada, the visa officer wants to know that if your plan to if your desire to immigrate to Canada does not work out, will you return to Ghana, and how can you use your education there? So you have to do a delicate balance in creating the study visa application about explaining that you want to study in Canada, and everybody knows that there are pathways to stay to immigrate. Canada actually needs international students to stay in Canada. Canada is planning to welcome 500,000 new immigrants next year, and to keep increasing from there, because Canada is a country that's getting older and where our birth rate is not high enough. So in order to sustain our population, we need immigration, and everybody agrees in Canada that immigration is what we need in order for the country to be successful. One of the things I'm very proud about for Canada compared to other countries around the world is how welcoming we are of immigration. There is a really broad acceptance across all of Canadian society that newcomers from around the world, from Ghana, from everywhere, are important for the success of Canada, and that Canada is not just a place for white people who have an English background, like myself. That it is a country where people who speak different languages, who come from different countries, and who are of different races need to come together for this country to succeed. And so, even though you are probably attracted to Canada because of these immigration opportunities, with your study permit application, you still have to explain that if your plan of staying in Canada doesn't work out, that you would return home. So that's why you also need to show ties to home. You need to talk in your application about your family, or about if you have property. That's really valuable to document the property, or if you have a job offer upon return. Any travel history you have is also really important to show. It's easier to get a study permit, study visa for Canada if you've traveled internationally before. And you need to show that you have the money to stay in Canada as well. The approval rate for applicants from Ghana is about 30%. So I know it's a scary number, and it's something that is a big fight that I work with when I work with people applying from Ghana. It is something we're very aware of, that we're fighting uphill a bit, and so that's why it's really important to take a lot of care with your study permit application, and also choosing your program of study in the beginning. It's really some of the common reasons for refusal, though, are related to financial documentation, that it's not clear enough that the money for your studies is available, or that the ties to home aren't strong enough, or that there's not much travel history. It's especially, in all honesty, if you are a postgraduate student and you're applying to come to Canada, it can be harder after the age of 30 or 35 to get a study permit approval. It's certainly not impossible, but there is, I will let you know, a bias in the visa officers' minds that they tend to approve people in their 20s more often than people who are over 30, because there's a stereotype about traditional college or university age, where people are more likely to get approved when they are younger. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. I've helped people, even I've helped someone who is 53 years old get a study permit once. So it is certainly possible to get a study permit after age 30, but it's important to know that you have to really prepare carefully in order to increase your chances of success. So then I have two more FAQs before we wrap up. One common question is about, are relatives allowed to sponsor my studies for the financial documentation? And the answer is yes. Here is a screenshot from the government instructions, but there has to be a letter from the person giving you money, and the visa officer will want to understand the relationship you have with that person, and why they're wanting to help you. Again, this is a cultural difference, perhaps, that in Canada, because we have government loans, like I talked about, it's not as common for extended family members to pay for their education of others. So, for example, I have adult nieces, a 19-year-old and 20-year-old niece, who are going to college right now, and because they are able to get loans, I, as their uncle, am not actually sending them money for their studies, and that may be strange in some countries, but it's fairly common in Canada. Again, because we have the government student loan system. But if you are applying as an international student and you have an uncle or an aunt who is helping sponsor your studies, you'll need a letter from them, and it's good to include some context about the relationship or about why they want to sponsor you, to help you. And then my final question was about age limit. There is no age limit for study permit applications, but again, as I said, it is often harder after age 30 or 35 to get the study permit approval. Not impossible, but you just have to work really hard to make the best application possible. And so that's where one of my areas of expertise is. And I have some information at the end of this presentation about how you can work with me if you want help on a study permit application. My website, yourcanadianstory.ca, is a place where you can get in touch with me. And I think I can share my contact information through intake as well. But yourcanadianstory.ca is where you can reach me, and I'll tell you more about the options I have for getting support with study permits. Just briefly right now, even though intake will support you for free, if you would like some one-on-one service from me, I have different options ranging from $120 or $119 at the lowest if you need help with your getting your statement of purpose edited up to $1,250, where I do everything for you. And I am offering a 10% discount on my services for anyone who attended this webinar. And if you want to book me to help you with your study permit application, I am offering a 10% discount for anyone who does sign up with me before June 30th. But I am here to speak for free to answer questions right now for the rest of this presentation. So again, my name is Mathew Mcdonald, and here is a photo of the Halifax Public Library where I will end my presentation right now. All right.
Hello, Mathew. This
Yes.
is Isiku Intake Ghana. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, we big thank you for the information. It was insightful, and we are grateful for that. We have so many questions, but few more minutes to go. So I don't know if you are ready. We can just move to the last part of the session and try to answer a few questions before we end the program. So
yes, I'm ready.
Okay. The first question is, how much time can I work as a student in Canada?
Currently, anyone who's in Canada is actually able to work full time. There's a special pilot project happening right now that international students who are already in Canada are able to work full time. This is a pilot project happening up until the end of 2023. But and so we're waiting to see if this will be extended or not. The normal rule is 20 hours per week off campus. We call it, and on campus as much as you want. My prediction is that this pilot project is going to be extended as long as Canada continues to experience a labor shortage, and that international students will be allowed to continue working full time. And we'll find out probably in about 6 months if that happens. But anyone who is applying now should know that the rule is that you can work 20 hours per week while studying.
Okay. The next question is about living cost. You know, it's not just about tuition fee, but the location or the city where you are going to live in is very important in terms of living cost. So could you tell a bit about which are the cities that are less expensive in Canada?
Absolutely. So I think it's in addition to cities, it's regions. I think if you look at the Atlantic region, it is less expensive. So, for example, in New Brunswick, you can study at the University of New Brunswick or New Brunswick Community College. They have places in St. John or Fredericton that are less expensive. So I don't know if those names are easy to remember, but if you remember, the Atlantic region is generally less expensive. I think the least expensive place in the country is in Newfoundland, which is Memorial University, St. John's, Newfoundland. I believe the tuition there is about $10,000 for university, and the cost of living is lower once you get there. But taking a flight there can be a bit more expensive than flying to Toronto. So, you know, it might be cheaper to fly to Toronto, but it's a lot more expensive to stay in Toronto. Other less expensive places are in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So Brandon or Winnipeg, Regina, those are also lower cost options. But I think just any city under 500,000 people will be less expensive. Just the big names that you've heard of, Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, are the more expensive places, except Montreal is actually the lowest cost of our big cities.
Okay. And how long could I stay in Canada after my undergraduate or postgraduate studies?
Most international students stay for 3 years on a work permit after studying. You can get a work permit. There's a few rules about the program you choose and that you have to follow, but generally you can expect to get a work permit for 3 years after you graduate. And then the idea is that you would use that 3-year work permit in order to get Canadian work experience that makes it easier to transition to permanent residency. So 3 years of an open work permit, you can work for any company anywhere in Canada. You can work for, for example, BlackBerry, when it was booming, was an exciting one to work for. You can work in cities like, work for companies like Microsoft. You can work in banking. You can work in agriculture. You can work in oil and gas, in media, anywhere across the country with that post-graduation work permit for 3 years after you study in Canada.
Okay. The next question is about financial documents. You mentioned a few that are accepted by IRCC. So we would like to know, is there any kind of financial support that are not accepted at all?
I cannot think so I guess cash is really the financial support that is not accepted because it can't be documented. There's IRCC is very flexible with accepting proof of funds, but sometimes I think documenting cash, in some countries cash is used a lot, and that can be harder to document. But bank statements from you or your family members are the most commonly used. Commonly used documents. If you're able to pay your tuition in advance, that is one very secure way to show that you have the funds available. So is there anything you have in mind, Isifu, that has caused trouble? I'm not thinking of anything strictly that cannot be used.
Okay. Now, your sponsor, does the sponsor really need to move the money into your account before it can be used?
No, the sponsor does not have to move the money into your account. The most important thing is actually the letter from the sponsor explaining why they are planning to help you and how much they are planning to help you. Sometimes applications get refused not because the sponsor doesn't have money, but because their relationship isn't clear. Certainly if the sponsor wanted to pay your tuition in advance, that would show that the sponsor is committed. What IRCC is worried about is sometimes sponsors say they will help, but they actually don't. I've seen some very sad situations where people truly believed that their sponsor was going to help pay for their studies in Canada, but then they got to Canada and then the sponsor was no longer willing, or did not contribute as much as they said they would, and so that puts the person in a very difficult place when they arrive in Canada and they don't have enough money for their studies or living expenses. So that's what IRCC really wants to avoid. So if you can show that if you're getting your sponsor from an uncle who's been a very close relationship with you for your entire life, then if you can show that this person is a close family member to you, that there's a lot of love, then that's probably going to increase the chances of success than maybe a family member you've never met who lives in another country.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. The next question is, when I apply for a study permit to study in Canada, do IRCC share information, biodata with US, or just the biometrics?
So Canada, that's a great question. Canada does have information sharing agreements with the United States. So this is true. In truth, a little bit mysterious exactly what is shared, but I would work under the assumption that the United States may have access to your information because Canada and the US work together for border security. So if you are worried about the United States, I think you should assume that there's a very high chance that there might be your information might be shared between the two countries.
Okay. Can you apply for a study permit while you are already on a visit visa in Canada?
You can, but it's a bit tricky. The system is designed that they don't want you to come to Canada as a visitor and then apply for a study permit. If you want to come to Canada for study, the entire system is designed that to discourage you, or sorry, to encourage you to apply from your home country before traveling to Canada. But it is possible. You definitely want to get some legal assistance to make sure you go through the very specific pathway, because you have to apply as though you are not in Canada. But it is a bit more difficult to do, but it is possible.
Okay. Please, to everybody listening to us today, I would like to mention that Intake Education, we do not charge for our services. And if you need Mathew for consultation, I believe you've seen that he's going to charge you for consultation. Again, he's a Canadian immigration consultant. Okay, Mathew, let me move on to the next question. My employer is sponsoring me. Do I still need to provide my personal bank statement?
You probably need to show your personal bank statement because your employer would rarely cover your living expenses as well. And you need to show you have money for tuition and living expenses. I would say you will also increase your chances of success if you show your personal bank statements. Just to give reassurance to IRCC that you have enough money to take care of yourself in case of emergency, because your employer is not going to take care of you in an emergency. So I strongly recommend that you include your personal statements as well, even if your employer is sponsoring you.
Okay. If someone got banned for a UK student visa, would that affect my study permit to study in Canada?
It might. Depending on the reason you were refused the UK visa, it could have a negative impact on you. But if your circumstances have changed since then, it's still possible for you to get a Canadian study permit. You have to explain in your Canadian study permit application about your previous visa refusal. So you have to address it. You have to talk about it. But that doesn't mean you won't get a Canadian study visa. It's definitely still possible to get a Canadian study visa.
Okay. The next question is, do you advise that I open a Canadian bank account to support my visa application?
No, you do not need a Canadian bank account to get a study visa. That's more work than anyone can be expected to do.
The next question again, it has to do with the fees that you charge, Mathew. I don't know if you could mention that again or display that. They would like to know how much you charge for your consultation.
So I have 5 different options here. At the bottom, you can see sometimes people want to hire me just to do everything for them. I prepare all the application forms. I'm available for calls to help you. I review all of your documents. I tell you which areas of weakness you have in your application so that you can make a stronger application. I write a letter summarizing why your study permit should be approved based on what I see as the strengths of your application. And I do everything and I stay in touch with you. I respond to all your concerns. I'm there to support you emotionally during this process until you get a decision. And so for that full support, I charge 1,250 Canadian dollars. And so that's the kind of the best, the all-in, if you want to work really closely with me. But I recognize that that's also expensive, and so I have created a few more affordable options where you can take a little piece of that advice. So the first option at the top, starting right, coaching for success, I say that's where you meet with me and we have a strategy call. We have a 30-minute call on WhatsApp or Zoom, and you tell me about what you're planning to study and about yourself, and I give you advice for how to make the best study permit application possible. You're going to do the application on your own, but I'm going to tell you what the areas of weakness might be. I'm going to tell you in your specific situation about financial documentation, and I'm going to give you a document checklist too. So that's $125. The second option is for people who don't like doing technical things. So maybe you don't want to create the account, and you don't want to fill in all of these government forms, because I know that government forms can be intimidating. So if you just want me to do the administrative work and set up the account for you, I'll give you the username and password so that you can still access it. That I do for a fee of $179. The third option here is all about that SOP or statement of purpose. So you are going to write it, but I'm going to edit it. And remember, I studied literature. I used to teach writing. So you have an editor here who understands writing and also what the immigration officers are looking for. So for $119, I will edit your statement of purpose, tell you its strengths and weaknesses so that you can make it better. The fourth option here for $499 is a complete application review. This is something you can do once you've assembled your entire application. You fill out the application forms, you organize the documents, and then you send everything for me to review. And then I will give you a written report of the strengths and weaknesses of your application. I will review it like a Canadian immigration officer and tell you if I think this application is going to be approved or not. And if I don't think it's going to be approved, I'm going to tell you specifically what I recommend for you to change in order to increase your chances of success. So that is for $499. And so those are all options for where you're going to do most of the work yourself. You're just going to hire me for expertise in specific areas. Then the full package is $1,250, where I do everything for you from start to finish. So again, I'm offering a 10% discount to anybody who has joined this session today. So the easiest way to reach me is through my website, yourcanadianstory.ca. If you go to my website, yourcanadianstory.ca, you'll see my email address. You'll see a form where you can contact me, or you can book a meeting with me directly. So these are the different services I offer to help with study permit issues, because this is my area of expertise. I have been working with international students for 10 years now. I've had my license as a regulated Canadian immigration consultant since 2016. So that's 7 years I've worked on immigration issues for international students. So if you would like some of that expertise, you can hire me for one of these services. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, we have a question here from Emmanuel Menson. I intend to pay my full tuition fee and accommodation fee to satisfy proof of funds requirement. So do you think that is the best way to meet the requirement and secure my visa?
So paying your tuition upfront is absolutely going to increase your chances of success. The even better thing that if you can do, I don't know if it's possible to do from Ghana unless you have family members in Canada or the United States, but there's something called a Guaranteed Investment Certificate, or GIC. If you have any family or friends living in North America who can help you get that, getting a $10,000 Guaranteed Investment Certificate, or GIC, plus paying your tuition, that is going to give you the highest chance of success with a study permit application. So if possible, that's the best way to do it.
Okay. Please, for any question related to admissions, so you can just contact Intake Education. You have a certificate, a diploma, HND, a degree with third class, pass, or whatever. You are not sure if you may even get just admission. Please just contact Intake Education. We will see what are the options available to you, and then we will take you through the next steps. So today we want to focus on visa questions. So anything related to admission, just contact Intake Education. You can send an email or call or send a WhatsApp message, then we will assist you from there. Mathew, I was denied many times. So what do you think I could change before I submit my application again?
This is an example of how I would need to get to know you better. I can't answer this question unless I know you and what your previous applications were, but this is one of the things that I do when I meet with people. I ask questions, I find out about the previous applications, and I will tell you what you need to change in order to try your application again. It is possible. I know someone from from Turkey, who applied from Turkey years ago, who applied 6 times for a study permit and was rejected every time, but was successful the 7th time. But I will meet you and tell you if there's something I think you can change to be successful. I will also tell you if I think realistically that you are not going to succeed, and then you can make the decision whether you want to try or not. Because I will, I think it's important to understand if something is not worth the effort of trying. I will give you that advice too. I believe it's important to be honest about your chances of success. So I will, if there's something that can be changed though, I will help you figure that out. But that it's a lot of immigration applications are specific to your individual life and background. So that's why what I do is I work with people individually and really help them figure out in their individual situation what they can change in order to improve their chances of success.
Okay, we are running out of time. Mathew, I just want you to answer 2 or 3 more questions. A
Sure.
quick one. I was given a study permit to study a master's program in Canada. How do I travel with my wife?
So once you have a study permit, you can apply for your wife to get an open work permit. And so your wife is able to get to work full-time while you study. And you can apply for that work permit before coming to Canada. The problem, though, is that the processing times can be quite long. But you would apply for a work permit, it's called, for your wife to join you. And you can also bring your kids with you if you have any kids. But you should apply for them as soon as possible because the processing times can be quite long.
Okay. One more question here. How do I show home ties to support my visa application?
The best home ties are property if you have them. If you don't have property, then family is another thing you would show, and any international travel history. International travel history is one of the most helpful things for a study permit application. So if you do have the opportunity to travel outside of Ghana before applying for a study permit, you should do that. That will really help your chances of success.
Okay. So please, we would like to thank you all for making time to join us today. I believe you've learned a lot from it and you know what to do now. Just contact Intake Education, no matter the stage of your application. Or maybe it could be that you are now coming to apply for admission. You even don't know what course apply for. You don't know which school apply to, or you have been denied a visa already and you don't want to apply again. Please just make contact and then we will take you through the next step. Mathew and Yomi, we are coming to the end of the session today. I want to say big thank you to all of you. But if you have any last word that you would like to share with people listening to us today, you are welcome.
All right. Thank you so much, Yusufu. I think the last thing I would like to say, that probably you could just share the office contact details on the screen.
Yes,
for
I'm
people
doing
to
that
have it one more time. Yeah,
in the
just
chat.
in case
Yeah.
they're wondering how to contact us. So I want to thank Mathew also for joining us. It's been a great journey you've taken us through, especially through all the stories that you told us. That's very insightful, and I find that very useful too. I'm sure our audience would find the same as well.
Thank you. It was great to be here. I was really happy to be able to share my story. As I said, I've benefited so much because of the high quality education I received in Canada, and so I wanted to share with the audience today just how much I believe in how education in Canada can really transform lives. So I hope that it has been inspiring for you today.
Yes, please.
Thank you,
so much.
Mathew. Thank you, Yomi. Do enjoy your weekend in Canada.
Thank you.
All right, Mathew. We'll see you in Nigeria's version.
Yes, I'll see you in Nigeria soon. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.